Stepping outside your comfort zone can sometimes be a challenging thing, especially whenever you are very well versed and suited, very used to speaking about certain things. So expanding and going further, while it is a healthy thing, can sometimes be challenging. So bear with me a little bit on this one. Twodown is the name of this band, and Two Lost Boys is the name of this album that you see up here on the corner of your screen. These guys are a bit unique. They have elements of alternative rock. They have standard rock in there. There's some orchestration that's present on this album. There's grime. There's hip-hop. There's a lot to digest. At times it sounds like this band is reciting long-winded poetry, either that or pages of a journal, you know. And I don't just mean pages from the journal that have been used through poetry. I'm talking like full-scale, you know, entries where the writer is pondering about some of the greater notions of life, where the writer is speaking very candidly about some of the basic human emotions, such as loneliness. And it's something that creates a atmosphere that sometimes connects you very closely, but also offers a bit of a disconnect, considering you can relate, but not perhaps the same way as this writer. So the orchestration on this album is something that boosts up some of its general, you know, guitar work, some of its general work on that basic musical compositional level. And this 14-track affair actually has its roots all the way back to 2007, so it's not as though this was one that was, you know, dabbled together over a weekend, you know, off at some cottage. Now, this was something that has its roots more than, you know, 8 years ago, and has been compiled and sort of reimagined and put together and really reawoken almost like a sleeping giant in order to be given to the world. And you know, whether it's the repetitious nature that you get in some of the elements of the very first track, Lost, either that or Heartshot with its grand orchestration to really start up this track and really flows throughout it, you know, whether it is some of the hip-hop stylings that it sounds like hip-hop stylings because it is being done very much in verse, very much in time, but it's just, you know, you have to call it what it is. You know, whenever you say the word hip-hop, you get a expectation in your mind, when in reality the term itself has a lot more broad meaning and a lot more broad significance. And this is one where that cadence, the way in which it's being presented, is within that construct, whether you want to believe it or not. If you're going into this album thinking it's going to be the next Killer Mike album or something like that, you're wrong about that. It's going to be a very different style. It's going to be one that has a little bit more of that artistic significance to it. Not saying that Killer Mike is not artistic, but it's being used as an element to, you know, really supplant or boost up one of the compositions that are already present. Killer Mike be damned. Not that bad. Empire of the Forest and really Heartshot are two songs on the early go of this album that really made an impression on me. And at times, this is a group that, I hate to really make this comparison, but it needs to be done, almost sounds like the UK avant-garde Linkin Park a little bit. And the Linkin Park side is based around that idea of clean singing going into a like screamed, or largely screamed, chorus that gives it a little bit of backbone, that really showcases a little bit of the anguish that perhaps is being really described within the tones of the lyrics. And it's certainly one that provides it with that very, very easy sort of comparison point. But I like that avant-garde adjective that's in front of it, principally because this is not really all of that conventional. We're not going to explore 8 minutes of just randomness. You know, we're not going to doodle and dabble on this album. This is instead one that does have some focus to it. But it is one that does have a certain amount of schizophrenia within this band's own personality that gives it that little extra, you know, sort of a hint of strange, that extra hint of exploration. Principally because this is a group that has so many different influences collected together that each of these songs could take a completely different pathway. They could take a softer pathway and really be more recognizable within the indie community, as opposed to some of the others that have a more harder, aggressive, you know, approach that is, you know, offset or even, you know, enhanced by some of the hip-hop lyrics that you get, or some of the hip-hop style singing of these like journal entries. Again, I had to go back to that idea. You read the lyrics in the booklet that's included, and you think that somebody is just writing very honestly about life, and writing very honestly about topics. And it kind of transforms you a little bit into the mode of, you know, either this main character, these two lost boys, perhaps, which could easily be reflective upon the two main members of this project themselves. Either that, or whomever that they have dreamt up for this album, you know, whatever the story may be. And either way, there's a lot of, you know, lyrical musings about loss, about, loneliness, about, really wanting a little bit more, or perhaps love, or love that's gone away. There's a lot of different real things that are on this album, I guess is the best way to put it. Saying real is very stupid, but it's definitely one that is draped with some reality within its lyricism, and the music that swirls, that orchestration that's met with, that sort of schizophrenic approach, does give this album a lot of charm, but at times can make it feel a bit disjointed, and that's sort of where the negatives start to emerge. The group is very talented, and they have a lot of big ideas, and these are some big ideas that, even when developed, can come off as a little bit hard to approach from a listener's perspective the first or second time. So what makes this group definitely more of a niche band, as opposed to one that is probably going to break out and smash through boundaries and really become a massive hit factory. And I don't listening to this album, it really doesn't, I don't feel like that's Twodown's approach whatsoever. That's not what they're aiming for. They're aiming for more honesty in songwriting and a lot more, artistry within music, and it's certainly reflective here on this disc. But that sort of hard to approach aspect of some of those songs can be a turnoff for those that are listening to this for the very first time. And also, another one of the big approaches that will kind of cause them a little bit of grief is that little bit of schizophrenia, that little plight, considering we are now in a very ADD world where everything needs to sound a certain way for us to be satisfied, at least those in the conventional realm. Those that are outside of that will listen to this and find a lot to really be very pleased with. But I also feel that the length of this album, the 14 tracks, and it's definitely one that does not, putz around and be done in 33 minutes. This is instead one that pushes the 50 to 60 boundary. It's definitely got some legs behind it that give it a little bit of a challenge whenever it comes to completing the whole thing. To be a true completionist with this album is more than just an endeavor, it's a commitment, and it's certainly one thing that is explored on this album's second half as well. So this time around in Drown, going into the unit, into Lonely Smile, these last couple of tracks can be a bit of a struggle to reach, but whenever you do, you will be rewarded, considering there is strong material that is really presented here. The one thing that I would like to hear from these guys, and perhaps that will be present on their next album, whether or not I will review that is really up in the air. I want to see what the cohesion of maybe one session, or sessions that have been slated around a couple of months, can really do, as opposed to transforming old songs, because the evolution of a songwriter is one that occurs every single time they put the pen down to the paper or they strap in and play their instrument. So I would love to hear what these guys are capable of after an album such as The Two Lost Boys, considering this is one that really was a love affair project. It was one that resurrected a lot of old songs that got brand new life breathed into them. I'm just kind of interested to see what they're able to accomplish after this. This isn't for everybody, especially on this channel. On this channel, this is a red-haired stepchild 100%. But those who are curious and bold, those who are not afraid to venture outside the heavy metal category, give these guys an opportunity. If you do have the time, you might find something that you are pretty interested in. As for a ranking for this, it's an older album, but probably like a 77 out of 100. It has enough good ideas to really keep it going, but it does at times lose its own focus, and that's what makes going through the 14 tracks as a whole such a really dedicated endeavor, one that you sort of have to sit down and force yourself into, and you shouldn't have to do that with a record. That was at least my approach. Somebody else can tell me I'm wrong. If you want to, do so in the comments. My name is coverkillernation, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.